Say why? So we have to infer, and this happens a lot in the Bible, we have to infer the reason for the great sin. And so I'm going to give it my best shot here. This is what I think was happening. If you look all the way through the Old Testament stories of the children of Israel, every time that they put their faith in God's hand, God took care of them. Even in battle, God would always take care of them if they did what he said. And sometimes God didn't use a big army to win battles. He won battles in the strangest kind of ways. And what happened here is David, in essence, decided that he was going to take control of the army. He could no longer trust God with the army. He was going to take control, and he needed to know how many people in the army that he had so he would know how he could defend the nation of Israel and who he could go attack, who he could conquer. And anytime an individual or a people decide that they can take care of things themselves, they can take their fate out of God's hands and put it in man's hand, I don't know whether there is a greater sin than that. So naturally, David sinned this great sin because he decided he was going to handle his fate and the fate of the people instead of letting God handle it. So that's what I infer is going on here. And, there's been lots of stories in the Bible like this. For instance, the story of Adam and Eve. All God told Adam and Eve was, if you eat from the tree, then you're surely going to die. And he didn't explain what that meant. I mean, if he'd have told them all the ramifications of what would happen to the world if they ate from the tree, Adam and Eve would have said, no, we'll never eat from the tree. They inferred the wrong thing. And in fact, when they ate the fruit, they didn't die. Did they? So they must figure, well, we didn't understand what was really going on there. And the example here for our lives, I think, there are times when we have to obey when we're not going to know the reasons why. We're just going to know that we have to obey because we know right from wrong. But God's not necessarily going to tell us everything we need to know to make the right decision. He's going to say, you know what the right decision is. You know you need to obey me. You know you shouldn't take your life back in your own hands. But David took his life in his own hands. And so he had this judgment that came upon him, and we've talked about this. This judgment seems really harsh for the sin, but again, this is a great sin. To take your life back from the Lord, I don't know of a sin worse than that. And that's what David did. And so we want to look at the first thing that David did that is an example, I think, of David's greatness. And we find it in verse number 14, and I want to read verse 14. And this is after Gad has told him about the three judgments. And David has to make a decision of which one of the three judgments am I going to choose. And this is what David says in verse 14. And David said unto Gad, I am in a great strait. In other words, I'm not sure what to do. But let us fall now into the hands of the Lord. For his mercies are great, and let me not fall into the hands of man. So this is really important. What David is saying is, I do not want to fall or trust into the mercies of man. The only mercies that I'm going to trust is God. Even though I know I'm getting ready to come under God's judgment, I trust in God's mercies, not man's mercies. Because see, the first two decisions he had, the deep recession, that's man-made. The attack from the enemies, that's man-made. sickness, pestilence, that's God. And he says, you think he's going to choose the one that was just 3 days. That wasn't the reason. He chose that one because he knew he could trust in the mercies of the Lord, even though he was going to have to go through God's judgment. Now this is a huge message for today. I was just listening to the political shows today, and what did I hear? I hear stuff on recession. I hear stuff on wars, Afghanistan, on judging the enemies within our country. We've certainly heard stories of the potential flu epidemic. And all that I hear our government saying to us, you can trust in our mercies. We'll take care of you. We care about you. Put your trust in our mercies. Is that not the root of what is being told to us? It doesn't matter what the story is. The root is you can trust in man's mercies. What David is saying, you can never trust in man's mercies. And I would say throughout history, never has man's mercies proved trustworthy. Anytime that a people set aside God and set aside his mercies and say, we're going to let the government take care of us, the government will fail them. And the very people that the government says, don't worry, we'll take care of you, they end up getting hit worse than anybody. So that's the first thing about David in his greatness. Never choose the mercy of man over the mercies of God. And then number 2 is found in verse 17. When David all of a sudden realizes that he's going to look after the self-interest of the people instead of his own self-interest. And in verse 17, David says, I have sinned, I have done wickedly. But these sheep, what have they done? Let thy hand, I pray thee, be against me and against my father's house. David says, don't hurt the people, they're innocent. I'm the one that sinned. Does it remind you of the scripture, Isaiah 53, 6? All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way. The Lord hath laid upon him the iniquity of us all. We're the sheep. See, David, he had the right concept. He just had the wrong sacrifice. He was offering himself up, let me be the sacrifice, but he had the right concept. Why do I know he had the right concept? Because if you'll read down to the end verses here, remember when he was told to use these fellows' threshing floor? And they told him, you're the king. You can do it any way you want to. It's free to you. What did David tell him? David said, nay, I will surely buy it from you for a price. David understood the concept. Judgment brings a price. Somebody has to pay. He said, I will not offer a burnt offering unto the Lord my God, which doth cost me nothing. That's God.